I promise I'll have a shorter video soon. What's up, my Yu-Gi Bros? I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0. Welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! And Business Casual. I am in kind of a weird position right now because I'm trying to minimize the horrifying effect of this light on me right now. I am currently in this room on the floor because I wanted to grab a room with a whiteboard, and also my house is full of roommates who are loud and annoying. Why do I want a whiteboard? Well, I want to talk to you a little bit today about budget and pricing. Yesterday, Team APS put out a video discussing the subject of budget options in the current format. These are specifically budget alternatives for cards that are popular in this format, such as Solemn Strike and Pot of Desires. Cimoooooooo then responded with a video discussing the issues with budget alternatives to popular options. I thought both of those videos, especially Cimoooooooo's, were important because of the expense required to play competitively in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And because I am a competitive player and I want players to be able to play competitively, I think it's important to be talking about budgets. The reason I thought Cimoooooooo's video was the more important of the two, and the one that I think that people should be thinking about the most, is because when you are building decks, especially for playing competitively, you are building to optimize the deck. You are building to maximize the potential for your deck to win. If you are running budget options for a card, budget alternatives for a card you know to be better for your deck, then you are not optimizing your deck. The unfortunate truth, though, is that those non-budget options are, well, non-budget. They are still very expensive, and if you want to play them, you are going to have to lay down a bit of money. And that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. The thesis of this video today, and the thing that I really want to emphasize, is that using non-budget cards, with the exception of like prize cards and things like that, is not actually all that expensive. I'm not going to look at you and dispute the fact that the price tags on these cards are fairly hefty, but what I want to tell you is that with a certain mindset and with a certain way of thinking about using those cards, you're going to find that you're actually spending a lot less money on the game than you think you do when you're using non-budget cards. The thought that is so important to this is actually fairly simple, and that thought is that once you are done using a card, you are capable of selling that card. When you buy a card, even if it's very, very expensive, you aren't sinking actually all that money into the game because you can then turn around and make at least a good portion of the money that you just spent on it back. So in the end, when you are purchasing a card, you aren't actually, when you purchase, for instance, Pot of Desires, you aren't actually dropping $80. You are kind of taking out an $80 card loan with an interest rate that I will talk about in a second. And this is important because even though you are going to be thinking, well, you're still putting money into this because you're going to lose money off of selling it, and that is sometimes true depending on how you use the secondary market. If you do binder building, if you pay attention, you buy cards when they're cheap that you know are going to be expensive or that you're going to need in the future, then you can actually have a revenue positive, I suppose, way of playing Yu-Gi-Oh! But even if you are just buying cards at their hype price because you just decided that you wanted to play this meta deck for an event and then selling it off immediately after, even if you have that little premium off the top that comes from having to sell it and the effort and the things after that, you are actually going to be gaining value out of that card because of the things that you get out of playing it. And I'm going to describe that in a second once I get to the whiteboard. Once again, I apologize for the weird lighting. I'm having to use a classroom which has only lighting from above from about 20 feet, so I'm not going to be particularly pretty in this video, but I want to use a whiteboard, and so here it is. What I want to demonstrate to you is the kind of price cut, the actually fairly small portion of a card's price that you actually spend when you use it in a tournament. This is once again only talking about if you are to purchase the card, use it for an event, and then immediately flip it. If you are going to be using cards for investment, it is actually possible that your cost can be even lower than this, or actually possibly a negative cost, as in you would be making money off of purchasing this card. That takes a little bit more effort, that takes a little bit more foresight, but it is possible, and therefore it is possible to play very, very well in Yu-Gi-Oh! On a budget, but using non-budget cards. So let's look at this for a second. We are thinking about the cost of using a card. And the thing that you immediately think of when you're thinking of the cost of running a card is the price. The price of buying that card. When you are getting a Pot of Desires, what are you spending when you purchase that Pot of Desires? However, when you are purchasing a card and then selling it off, there is one additional cost that is involved, and that is the effort in getting the card and then getting rid of the card. So I'm just going to shorten this down to F, or EFF. So those are the two costs that are associated with getting a card for an event. This is getting a card, using it, and then selling it off. However, since you are selling it off, you then get a bit of that price back, which is your selling price. Now, your selling price can be above what you bought it for, above your purchasing price, or it can be below your purchasing price depending on when you buy it and when you sell it. But there is an important thing to notice here, which is that your selling price isn't just the dollar amount that is on the price tag. This is your, I'm going to say price tag, as in PT. Your price tag is not the only thing that you are going to be taking into account. When you're thinking about your selling price, you are thinking about your price tag minus the overhead that whatever your selling method costs you. So your eventual actual cost for playing the card is only going to be the price of the card itself plus the effort that you put into getting it and getting rid of it, and then you're subtracting your selling price, which is a function of your price tag and the overhead. So I'm going to give a little bit of a demonstration on this using Pot of Desires, since that's kind of the expensive classical example in this format. So let's say you want to play a playset of Pot of Desires in your deck. What is going to be the cost of your using that Desires? That blue is very, very difficult to see. Let me use the black. Now, when we think about the cost of running 3 Pot of Desires, we are thinking about the price tag on a playset of them, which is about $240 at $80 a piece. This is that price tag, that $240 price tag that has a lot of people intimidated. However, once you take into account the fact that you can sell this back, you're actually going to be paying a lot less to be using this card. Now let's think about the fact if you're going to be using this for one event and then flipping it, you're probably going to be selling it at about the same price that you were going to buy it. So we are going to be subtracting the quantity of 240 minus the overhead that a website is going to be charging in order for you to sell it. Which in this case, I'm going to use eBay because it's really easy and it is a fairly hefty fee in comparison to other sites. It's about 10%. So we're going to be taking $24 off of this. So in total, we are actually going to be subtracting from 240, we are going to be subtracting $216. Now our cost is only that $24 that eBay takes as overhead. However, we also have the effort and the shipping that is required. Shipping is probably going to be about $5, I would say. And if we think about the effort of posting a listing for a playset of Pot of Desires or a set of listings, it's probably going to be taking about a half an hour of your time. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to say that that's about a half an hour's worth of minimum wage when thinking about the effort required to sell your card again, which is about half in Washington. Minimum wage is $10, so I'm going to be saying about $5. All this taken into account, our total cost for a playset of Desires is not cheap. It is about $34, but it is certainly cheaper than $240, which is the price tag that we think about usually. Now, I know that many of you think about this intellectually, but this isn't something that we really take into account or take to heart when we are thinking about purchasing expensive cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! $30, $34, if you do enough binder growing, is a pittance in Yu-Gi-Oh! If you are doing your binder investments properly, this is something that you can get out of just some cheapo rando cards that you've picked up and you've held on for a while and may have gained some value over time. This is not a huge amount of money. However, it is not cheap. So I want to talk to you about why even this price tag is worth spending. So we are trying to justify spending $34 on a playset of Pot of Desires. That is the amount of money we are actually going to be losing to get the opportunity to play those 3 cards in our deck. If you are losing all of this money, straight up, this is not money you are making back just off of selling the card. Why could you justify, how could you possibly justify dropping $34 out of the price of getting a card, using it, and then selling it off? This is not just having the card around, this is the total cost of the transaction. Well, it's because you're going to be using it. When you're going to an event, you are going to get value out of that card. And I want to show you a little bit, just from my own personal value function, I guess you could say, why this is a justifiable amount to be spending. When you are going to an event, you are trying to get a certain amount of value out of that event. And that comes down to things like skill building. I'm going to just be listing out a few things. So skill building is one of the things that you get from going to something like regionals. You get good games. Good games are a good value that I want to get out of regionals. When I'm going to try and top, if I'm going to be playing this as competitively as possible, there are a couple of things that I want out of topping. One of those things is prizing. Prizing is something that I want out of topping. I'm going to regionals, so I'm not going to get great prizing, but it's something that I can get. I want to get a feeling of success. That's a big thing for me personally. I like the feeling of success from succeeding in a competitive gaming arena. And of course, finally, if you're going to regionals, one of the things you're going to want is the invite. These things have value. When you are going to an event, you are taking time out of your day, you are paying gas money, you are paying entry fees in order to get these things out of an event. If you're willing to put down money for an event, then clearly these things matter to you, these things have value, and therefore there should be an amount of these things which can justify the amount of money that you are spending in order to get there. And that's the key that we're going to find for this. And one of the things you'll want to know is that when your deck is suboptimal, then you have actually a potential of losing money and losing value off of an event, because keeping in mind there are costs associated with going to an event. If you are paying, say, we'll say it's going to be a regional, so the entry fee is $20. If you have travel expenses, we could say they're $20 as well. And just to make things simple, I'll put in another $20 for other expenses. This is thinking about food, this is thinking about the amount of time that you're taking out of your day. So I'm going to say that we're going to be subtracting $60 worth of value out of this. That means that if you don't get the sufficient amount of value out of these things, you are actually losing value out of going to that event. So if we're trying to justify losing $34 on a card, we need to start thinking about value of these things. Now, these are a lot of things that are hard to quantify the value of. Of course, prizing you can value out, because playmats usually, your average regional playmat you can sell for like $30. And things like that, but something like good games, the value you get out of enjoying a game, or feelings of what the hell is this? Oh, that's your invite. Feeling of success. That's something you can't really quantify very easily. And so in economics, we have a little trick that we do for this, which is you can value something in dollars by asking yourself how much money somebody would have to take away from you to offset the value of that. So if I get a really big feeling of success from doing well at a regional, then how much money would somebody have to take away from me before I started feeling worse than I did before that? So I'm just going to talk about personally when I'm thinking about a regionals. The skill building that I get, I would value at about $20. Good games, a day full of good games is really, I put a high premium on a day full of good games. I would pay $30 just to get good games all day. Pricing, I can say the very maximum is about $45. You've got your mat, and then you've got if you're thinking about the average of packs, the average value of a pack, you're going to get about a maximum of $45 worth of prizing out of this. Feelings of success, this one's a big one for me. I have a pretty high premium on feelings of success. When I do really well at a regionals, somebody would have to take away something like $50 from me. And then finally, invites, they're not particularly important to me. To some people, they're absolutely the most important thing because they really want to go to nationals. I'm going to say about $10. So this is the maximum that you could get out of this. If you were to add this up, you would get, let's see, you would get about $155 worth of value out of this event. Take away that $60, and you still get about $85 worth of value out of this event. That's a fair amount of money. If I were to be able to get that, I would really be able to justify that $35, but that's my maximum. If we were to think about, this is going to be if I play my best and if my deck is the best that it can be. Let's think about if I were to be playing a suboptimal deck. I think that if I were to be playing a suboptimal deck, my skill building, I couldn't build my skill the best that I could if I'm playing a suboptimal deck because I'm not playing to my fullest potential. I could play my best in a particular situation and build my skill in that way. What would I have done if I were playing this situation perfectly? However, you really couldn't know that. You really couldn't gain the potential skill you would have without the optimal deck, because when you are building an optimal deck, you are building for each of those scenarios. So you want to be increasing the success or maximizing the success that you could get out of a scenario when you're deck building. And so you can't get your full skill building out of running a suboptimal deck. I would say that the maximum amount of skill building you're going to get using a suboptimal deck in a day is about $10 worth. Good games, you can have some good games when you're running a suboptimal deck. It is highly plausible that a good half of your games are going to be good games. I'll put this at about $15. Pricing, you're not going to do very well with a suboptimal deck, or you could do fairly well, but not your best. And so the likelihood that you are to get this 45 is going to be very low. I would say that your best pricing options are about $20. And then for your feelings of success, if you're running a suboptimal deck, that really, really increases your chances of not doing well. And when you have feelings of success, it's actually possible that you can have feelings of success that have negative value, that actually take away from your good feelings. And so I'm actually going to put that feeling of success down to like $5, because you reach an equilibrium of 0 at some point. And after that, I actually find that I have like a negative fun if I do really, really poorly at an event. And then, of course, if you're not going to get your invite, you get nothing up here. So here you have $35, $45, $50 is your maximum at that event. If I were to be thinking about my own personal utility function, I suppose, for going to an event with a suboptimal deck, that means that you're actually going to be losing $10 out of the event. So you actually lose value from running a suboptimal deck without these really, really expensive cards. You actually lose out, even if your deck is the cheapest it could be, you're still going to be putting down money. You're still going to be losing money. And so if you are going to be losing money off of a deck, let's say that you are going to be running a deck that has a total cost of $40, and that's, this is just one play set of cards. So a deck's cost as a whole has the potential to be a lot higher than that. You're going to actually be losing out on value because you chose to forego that amount of money. And this is true. This can be shown on many different people's utility functions. For some people, that's not that important, because for some people, this winning part that I value so much, the feeling of success, the skill building, that kind of thing, those are not as important to some people. But for a lot of people, especially if you're going to be playing at all competitively, if you're going to be going to a regional event, it actually makes it worth it to lose out on those $35, because you do get a lot of value. Maybe it's not $50 worth of value out of a feeling of success that I get, but you are going to be losing value out of not doing as well at an event as you could have done. And this really right here, this amount of money that you are going to be losing on the game because you aren't going to be selling everything at higher than you buy it for, is the price of playing the game. There is always a price of playing a game, a price of a hobby. And in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh!, it is the price that you put down for cards and for going to events that you cannot make back off of the game. And so that's why I think that it's worth it to be spending the money on these cards, even though they are very expensive. And even if you sell them back, you get this cost that you will never get back off of those cards. Even so, I still think that it's worth it to be buying the best cards possible for your deck. And those aren't always going to be these $240 cards. You're going to be losing $35 off of it. Most of your decks are going to be much more budget than having a play set of cards be $35. And so that's why I think that it is worth it to listen to Alex Cimoooooooo when he's talking about how much better the original versions of cards are, or the best versions of cards are, than the budget alternatives. If you are actually getting this kind of value out of those cards, which comes from not only just good deck building, but also from good play, then you are going to end up offsetting the amount of money that you actually spend on it. So from the nerdy economist's point of view, this is actually the real cost of the game, and I think that it is very worth it to pay attention and actually put all of the best cards in your deck that you could possibly give yourself. Should you do this for all of your locals? Not necessarily. If you're going to be playing a lot at locals and you're going to be playing a lot of events, this kind of frictional cost that you get from buying and selling may not be worth it. But if you are going to be going to a big event, if you're going to be going to a regionals, which I encourage everybody to do, I encourage everybody to play as competitively as possible when they can, when they go to a competitive event, when they have the opportunity to go to a competitive event, then this may be a very useful thing to think about. Alright, there you go. That's my nerdy take on this whole discussion. I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, let me know why in the comment section below. Of course, discuss what you think about budgets. Ask me any questions that you want to in the comments. I'll see if I can answer them. And you can feel free to dispute all of this with me. This is once again my own values and my own way of thinking about the game. Anyway, thank you all for watching. I'm your host, the one, the only, the RJB0, and I got a jet. See ya.